Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is a Ways and Means Subcommittee meeting. I am the chair. I'm John Kingston. On this committee with me is Anthony Caggiano and Stacy Bronson Rizzo. Ms. Rizzo, I think, will be arriving late. She had a previous appointment. There's three things on the agenda. The first one is school transportation. The second one is middle school lottery, and the third is additional classroom space at the Garfield Middle School. School transportation, my concerns are that obviously transportation has become a kind of I won't call it a budget buster, but an extreme expense to the district. And I thought, or my thinking was that if the middle school lottery was replaced and we went to more of a neighborhood school concept, that we would save some money. I realized the superintendent presented us with some cost saving options. The only thing, and my fault for not getting back to you sooner, the more I looked at this, there was one scenario that I would have liked to have seen was we have the lottery plus 1 mile. The cost on that is $1.9 million. The lottery plus a 2 mile radius, we would save $952,000 off the 1.9 million. And the second scenario was no lottery in 2 miles. We'd save, you'd have to add the 952 plus the 317, which would be about $1.2 million. The next scenario, and I didn't ask for it, so I'll take that as on me, was the lottery and a 1 mile radius. I'm sorry, the lottery, no lottery and a 1 mile radius of busing. Because we only have the 1 mile and the 2. So that would be something that I'd like to see. I do think, I would like to see the lottery go away. I think to try to save some money on transportation costs, number one. Number two, there's numerous trips made by parents back and forth across the city. I did have a ton of parents talk to me about that. You know, they're not as concerned about the busing costs as maybe I am, but they were more saying the parent trips back and forth, picking up their students and what that does to traffic in the city and getting across the city to pick up your student on time, just with the traffic in the city. So I believe it's too late to make any, I believe it's too late, and welcome to talk to anyone who'd like to discuss it. I think it's too late to do anything this year, but I really think it's something that we need to look at for next year. Just because of the cost. And also the transportation, just the parent transportation of moving kids across the city and what maybe a more of a neighborhood school concept would help with traffic and with saving some costs. I don't know if Mr. Caggiano has any.
Yeah.
And I do have a question for Matt. Can I go for it?
Okay.
Matt, can you explain to us how I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and please add to my whatever information I have. The city actually does the paying of the bill. We just administer the busing program.
Right, there's two different realities, that it's the city's responsibility to foot the bill or to make it happen school-wise. One is the buildings themselves. Two is getting kids to the buildings. So they provide the facilities, they get the kids to the school, and then the school department is responsible from there for everything education related. The reason that we end up intersecting with them in these conversations is it just makes pragmatic sense for the school department to be invested in the running of the program, because we're in touch with school start times, pupil counts, principals,
special needs, transportation.
So the city basically says, hey, we know it's our responsibility to get the kids to school. How much is it going to cost you to do that this year? We have to foot that bill, and then you can run that program for us. So that's the nature of that intersection, which means it's a collaborative effort.
So who decides on the 2 mile radius? Us or the school, us or the city side?
The school committee decides what the structures and policies are around the schools. And then the city is obligated within that structure to provide transportation according to state law, which includes for any student who lives more than 2 miles from their school. And any student who has transportation requirements through their individualized education plans.
So, okay.
So any money, just to be clear, any money savings on transportation doesn't come back to the schools. That's
Right.
city money, which of course we should
No, we're trying
be
to do our
good
best.
stewards, right,
absolutely.
yeah.
So my question is, if the city decided to go to the 2 mile distance and say, we're not gonna pay the 1 mile, right? Is that
It's not in their purview to do that. That's the
It's not-
school
okay.
committee's purview.
Okay. So they can't, so, and I'm not saying they are, but if they said to us, you're gonna go to the 2 mile, because that's the state law, we'd have some say in that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just not sure, I'm not sure how that works, because it hasn't come up yet,
It's come up a few times. It might have predated you, John, but,
probably.
it did come up, a few years ago when they were looking at going to the 2 miles. Because we used to provide transportation for everybody. And that was super expensive, and to cut that back, we went to the 2 mile rule for high school kids. And the school committee at the time voted to keep it at 1 mile for middle school because they're younger and
Yeah, no problem.
crossing highways and, all of those pieces played into effect. But that's why we have the 2 mile rule now at the high school. We used to just let anybody who wanted to get on a bus.
Great, no, I understand. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm done for the moment.
One question I wanted to ask is, what would be the impact if the committee decides not to go to a lottery? What impact would it have in classrooms? So if we are gonna just look at this next year, one of the impacts I'd like to be before I vote on it is, would I increase the size of classrooms
Hmm.
in certain areas? And what can we do to keep it down? Do we have supplemental busing to even things out or anything? That's one of my biggest concerns when we do that.
Mm.
And then if we decide, or the city sentence made, it goes to 2 miles, which I would never be in agreement with, is we have a lot of kids crossing highways,
Mhm.
which is not a good situation.
Yeah.
But when we do sit down and look at this more, and can we have also how it would impact the classrooms?
Yeah, so I did pull some data that I sent you last night, and it's on the sheet that says data on middle school selections.
Right.
And there are two tables there. And the first one, this is just this year's data, because I thought one of the things you might want to start thinking about is what parents, the reaction that parents are gonna have, because I appreciate that there are some parents who would rather have their kid in their neighborhood school and not have to worry about the traffic the way that John articulated. I think there are some other parents who are gonna feel differently. We have calls all the time from parents who don't want to go to their neighborhood elementary school because some other elementary school is actually on their way to work and they can drop the kids there. And, we have policies in place where they can appeal to be in a non-neighborhood school, and we abide that whenever we can. I think you'll see the same kind of thing happening at the middle school. There's a lot of different reasons why folks select their first choice school, but just to give you some of that information, in this year's lottery, which Dr. Mopaba is going to be talking about at the regular meeting, of the 527 students who are going to be in the lottery, and that's not all of the fifth graders, because some of them have unique placements due to their special education needs,
Right.
and some of them are allowed to go to a particular school because they have a sibling at that school. And then there's the employee preference for if there's a fifth grader whose parent works in a particular building, we allow them preference to go to that school as well. So you see 527 is the number included in the lottery. Of those, 141 picked Garfield Middle School for their first choice, 218 picked the Romney Marsh, and 168 chose the Susan B. Anthony. So that's just a way to show the imbalance in how people select which school they want to go to. And I think we talked a little bit about this last time, like they don't necessarily have to have a selection. If we come up with a way to say we're gonna have neighborhood middle schools, then we can look at it from that lens as well. And so the bottom graph on that page, it shows sixth grade enrollments by area of the city. And we talked a little bit internally about what would make sense if we were gonna have quote unquote neighborhood schools. And just based on proximity, it made sense that the Beachmont and the Garfield would go to Garfield Middle for proximity. And that the Lincoln and the Wayland would go to the Susan B. Anthony, which means that the Hill and the Paul Revere would go to the Rodney Marsh. That's how we could rearrange it and have the least distance between home and elementary, neighborhood school and middle school. But if you look at that data, it's also skewed. That means that for just using this year as an example, there are 149 fifth graders at the Garfield and the Beachmont. by contrast, there are 202 at the Lincoln and the Wayland. So that makes for very different class sizes in those two schools. And means that the Garfield Middle School would have much smaller class sizes than Susan B. Anthony. And we could definitely redistribute staff a little bit to try to reduce those class sizes, but as we know, all of our schools are overcrowded. There's no school in this district that's not overcrowded. And so trying to make more classrooms, have more teachers isn't as easy as it might be in some other districts. So there's a lot to consider. I agree with, folks who have spoken on this already, that maybe it is a good time to really think through all of this. And come to any kind of a conclusion that we can, prior to next year's lottery. I would think that we would need to, really think this through and have a decision by December, so that we could communicate it to parents and families, and they would understand if there were gonna be any changes, what those changes were gonna be, with adequate time to make their own plans.
And maybe a timeline for this building as well,
Yeah,
you know?
yep,
Isn't that what Aisha asked last time? Because it could be counterintuitive, I think the word was that you used.
Counterproductive, yeah.
yeah, to make a big change now and then. Yeah, and I think that is a good question probably to include the mayor in. I know that, so as Matt just very clearly articulated, the upkeep of the buildings, any of that work also is the burden of the city. And we know that they have accepted an enormous burden for us in the building of the new high school. I don't know at what point they're gonna have an appetite to take on another. It would be minuscule in comparison, cost wise, but it would still be, I would guess, and Carl, we talked about this with the design team when we first started the process of, the whole high school project back in 2016, 2017. And at that point, they thought it would be about $20 million. I'm gonna guess that would be like $40 million today. And so I don't know exactly, I can't speak for the city on when they're gonna have the appetite to take on that additional cost.
Do you think, Matt, do you think the transportation costs are gonna be significantly less if and when this becomes a central middle school? As opposed to having the three different schools?
I think it will help some. What we're never gonna escape is the challenge of the geography of the city, where the Point of Pines and North Revere are really far away from the city center. And so the kids that live in those two areas in particular will always have a distance to travel to school. Even when this is a central middle school, that we'll still have to make sure those kids are able to get to and from school.
But the volume of buses that would be required would be reduced. right?
Yeah, and I think that Matt put this first page together that John was talking about a minute ago.
Yep.
If you look at the no lottery 2-mile radius on the bottom of the page, it only requires right now 6 buses to get the kids to those middle schools. And that's based on if we did Beachmont and Garfield, go to Garfield, Hill and Paul Revere, go to the Rumney, Lincoln and Wayland, go to the Susan B. Anthony. So those 6 buses are significantly fewer, and you can see the 3 that go to Susan B. Anthony, that's primarily the kids who live in North Revere. And the 3 that are going to Rumney Marsh are taking the Paul Revere kids from Point of Pines to Rumney Marsh. That's where those 6 buses are coming from. They're coming from those 2 remote areas of the city. And, you know, so there would be some savings if the school committee decided to go to a no lottery 2-mile radius rule. But it would still mean that you'd have a whole lot of kids, like think of the Beachmont kids who don't live in Point of Pines, they're still crossing a highway to get to the Garfield. And so that's a decision that the school committee has to make if that's something they want to,
But legally, we don't even have to bus them.
out unless they're more than 2 miles.
Right.
Right, yeah, true.
Right,
Do we know how many students fall in that range? Like how many students were busing that fall outside of the,
Matt might know, because he did this
Outside
work
of the
with
legal
Denise.
requirement?
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know the student count, but I know that the number of buses, these are our best
The 6.
estimates of what it would be. And Also, don't forget, like whatever the count is of kids that can go on the bus. Say it's 40 per bus for middle school age. Well, if you have 81 kids, you need a
You
third.
need a third bus no matter what.
So the three could be two in a year where you happen to not, or it could be four in a year if there's 6 big families that are now
Right.
living in North Revere that weren't there before.
Mm.
Right.
Just thinking about the transportation costs, do we do anything, where like we would offer parents money to take their kids,
Yeah.
drive their kids to school?
Yeah, especially our special needs kids,
That's
because
what I'm
that's where the
thinking.
bulk of our cost is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a lot of parents who sign up for that. It depends, often those kids have some significant physical needs that have to be met. And so if the parents don't have the converted van that allows for a wheelchair, especially for the older kids, once they hit middle school, then they can't transport them anymore. But a lot of them do transport elementary.
Maybe cheap.
I know.
Well, two summers ago, I did some analytics coursework and focused on this problem.
Yeah,
And it kicked out some, suggestions that we have implemented. One of which is you contact every parent possible, you explain who it is that could drive their student to school, not just mother and father,
Mhm.
and you see if there is interest there.
yeah,
And then there is a threshold in which it is worth it for us to just buy the vehicle ourselves, but it's a much higher threshold than you would imagine analytically. And so even though our bidding seems exorbitant, when you look at the cost per run and you compare it to that, you say, it's still better for us to hire the vendor
right,
than have to figure out
Right.
insurance, where do we put it?
Right,
How do we get the
benefits
capital
and-
purchase? Who's driving it? Who's the backup driver? So we really have done all that we're doing. And
but we could.
That was
could
2
maybe
years
reach
ago.
out
I
to
think you
the-
did the analysis, Matt, I think you were both here when you did the analysis of should we hire, do it
Yes,
internally
we
and
talked
buy
about
our
that,
buses
because that was
and
one of my
hire our own
questions, why don't
people.
we have our own fleet?
And right, there's a price point there
Yeah.
where you would do it. But the price point,
Doesn't make
at
sense.
the point it was in the mid-70s. And it doesn't make sense. It would cost us more
Mhm.
to do that than an outside vendor is doing it for us. And we know if a run came in at 97, then we know, okay, we need to go back out to bid and find someone who can bring it down because we know where the price break is. We're not just blindly agreeing to contracts. And also, don't forget, we have the challenge of if we own 10 more even minibuses, where are they going to go? Now there's the costs for storage and security. The costs add up to do that. And the
And
other,
hiring 10 more drivers who have health insurance and
and backup drivers, because we can't.
Yeah,
So all of that, we did, it's a big spreadsheet, and it was helpful. Because if it would have said to us, hey, it's $45,000. And the majority of your runs with outside vendors are 75, then we would be taking
Of course, if
aggressive
that was
action
the
to
plan.
change that. But it's actually was flipped, which affirmed us in, there's nothing we can do in some of this to save money.
have we made those calls? I just wasn't clear on that, like you said, we could call, all the parents of students with
we do.
IEPs and special
every
needs.
year.
Just
we
to
call them.
see if the, and.
And
some
then we
of them
call them
do,
the next
but
year, even if they say no one year, we
you
still call them the next year.
year.
You can see
Okay.
them on the warrants.
Yeah,
Okay,
The,
No, I see them on there, but
Yeah.
I see the ones that aren't on there too, so.
the analogy to keep in mind from John's opening question is. So, and again, sometimes you use extremes to understand it. Imagine if the school committee said, we want every kid in Revere to get to school in a limo. And it's gonna cost us $60 million a year. You guys gotta pay for it. Then the city would naturally come back to us and say,
are you crazy?
we respect you, school committee, but we're not doing that because we can't afford it. So this is the first time now that all of our cost saving measures still have a gap. Which is why this question of, are they viewing the committee saying, hey, there are reasons we are at 1 mile and not 2. But since it's collaborative, they may come to the table and say, we need to talk about those reasons because because the two has become unaffordable.
Mhm.
In other words, that's the collaboration that,
That was my reason for the
Yeah,
question, yeah, and I'm
that is
hoping
happening.
that doesn't come to pass. I'm not for the lottery, I'm for neighborhood schools, but I'm not for the 2 miles. So all I would ask from this conversation is if, and it doesn't have to be tomorrow, by next month maybe, I would just like to see what no lottery and 1 mile radius.
yes, I'll do it this week, but I think it's 0, but I'm not
Well, no, my
remembering
thought is, I
why.
realized the first year savings wouldn't be very much, I get it. By the end, the way I'm looking at it is, okay, 6th grade wouldn't be in a lottery, 7th, and this is how I'm looking at it, and someone else might say, no, we'll move them all.
Right.
I'm really,
No, no,
don't,
no, 6th grade, you wouldn't,
I just don't think it's a good idea to move everybody. So
no.
we're not, in my opinion,
Yeah,
I'm not an educator, but I'm sure, educated, hopefully educators will
Absolutely.
agree. I'm not trying to move all the kids, but to me, it'd be a 3-year process, so we wouldn't lottery the 6th, 7 and 8 stay where they are, so to speak. And then, you wouldn't see a significant savings, I agree, in the first year, but hopefully by the 3rd year you would. Because now you have to be busing less kids in the 3rd year.
right. I believe it may not have been on here either because I'm missing something about the nature of that, or it's the same difference
Okay.
in savings, but I'll look at that with Denise this week.
Yeah, because that would be my preferred, that would be my, I mean, if
Yeah,
I was
I think-
voting today, that would be my preferred, no lottery in 1 mile.
We'd be looking at this, but with a 1 mile radius instead of a 2, so you'd be adding to
You have
this
kids
cost.
anyways.
So John, I
No,
was
the
just
1
saying,
mile, no,
I
I'm saying
don't
1
think it
mile with
saves us
no,
anything.
I'm saying 1
Yeah,
mile with
right.
no lottery.
Because of the shift.
I
Yeah.
apologize for not being on time,
Mhm.
but what are we doing with 6th grade if they're not
I'm sorry.
part of the lottery?
No, he's saying where they've already kids have already started school in the middle school, 6th grade.
Mhm.
You wouldn't want to move them out of the
The
school
7th
that
and
they've
8th
already
grade.
started, let them finish their 7th and 8th.
Mhm.
eighth
To
year.
achieve if the city said to us, all right, we want to achieve maximum savings. Probably, and I don't want to do this, so I want to be very clear, this isn't my idea, not at all. But if you went to the 2 miles and no lottery and moved everybody, which I don't agree with, but if that's what they came back and said, that would be maximum savings in the first year.
Was it 2 years ago that Richford State was in front of us questioning the transportation? How we
was.
don't have to pay?
and we did
I
redo,
know, that's
I
what-
think they didn't have a $300 million, $500 million school they,
Yeah,
at
Yeah.
the time, so
Yeah.
no.
and we
I
did,
think that's what we changed.
that, Stacy, we just talked about that, I think it might have been right. Yeah,
apologize.
that's okay, but, we talked about when Matt did the analysis of whether or not we should bring in internal, and it was gonna cost more money and.
Yeah.
And those pieces, but, we absolutely wanna work and partner with the city, we owe them everything
Yeah, I
that
agree.
we have, like, I don't
Right.
wanna
Absolutely.
diminish that, but I do wanna reemphasize that they don't get to make these decisions,
Right.
John. You make these decisions.
No, that's fine. That's why I
Yeah.
asked the question.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to hear it. And, I did.
Right, and
So-
some of it is education that that everybody understands. There's probably 6 or 7 action items that we've taken on transportation costs over the years, including contributing every possible penny that we could from supplemental funding that's come in the response of COVID to lessen that burden for the city. Pushing opportunity with parents,
Mm.
knowing what our analytical thresholds are. And then when you come sit in our office and you say, wow, all these kids have to get to all of these schools every single day, all year. And even with all of that, the price is
It's still what it is.
Yeah.
still what it
And
is.
this is our least expensive stuff. This in district, non-special ed transportation is the least of the cost. It's the special ed
Yeah,
transportation,
Outpatient, I mean, not out student. out-
outplaced,
Place.
yeah, I do.
Right, but I
Yeah.
figured there's
You know
no
what
way
I
to go. The only reason I was looking at this is because
Yeah.
I figured, I'll be frank, I figured they were looking at this. The students with special needs, that's not gonna change. And, I know they work hard in the
Right.
transportation office trying to get reimbursements and all that good stuff. And
Yes,
and that's
and
great.
we
No, I know they
maximize
work very hard at
travel.
that. No, I get it.
There's
but I-
kids that
yeah.
can get on the same bus
No, no,
within the
I-
city to the
no,
program we're
there's no
doing.
criticism here. I just figured, I have a lot of parents that reach out to me that don't like the lottery, and I don't think I'm saying anything.
I know, but I
No,
don't think that has
yeah.
anything to do with transportation. Those are two separate.
Well, no, it
No, I
doesn't.
think he's
Definitely too
seeing it as a
separate.
means of. Cutting
Trying to
costs,
save us some money
saving
to
money
cut
on
costs and trying.
transportation.
Yeah,
It's knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone.
what
I-
this
that's how I
analysis
see it.
confirmed is the primary savings available immediately is with an increase in the lower limit distance from the 1 mile
So the two,
that we're doing because of various reasons to the two that's required.
Right.
And of course, there are secondary savings that could be triggered with an elimination of the lottery, but they're a third of the mile change. And they wouldn't hit for 3 years
Correct.
because you're not gonna
Right.
make a seventh grader be
No, right,
interrupted in
that's my
what their
point, yeah.
plan.
So I know, I realized the first year savings, if you gave us a graph and it said, John, it's next to nothing, I would get it. But in the second and third year, there would have to be a savings, because it's just, you're moving less kids.
Well, it would be for the fourth school year from the decision being made,
Right.
when there would be, we would have the
But
bottom.
I'm thinking that's when you know, that's when we might hit the cliff maybe, or if the, you know, the imaginary cliff, or if it's a real cliff, that's what I'm thinking. And, you know, we'd just, you know, saving some money for everybody on both sides.
And the challenge with that would be if you do look at this data around the sixth grade enrollment by the area of the city. So we had talked about this. Do you have this one? It might be on the back of your regular meeting packet. I sent it last night. I got to Stacy.
Yeah, there's the cover sheet, but there wasn't your supplement. There's plenty of
Oh,
cover
okay.
sheet.
I looked it over.
There you go.
I looked it over.
So the difference here for Garfield Middle having,
I guess-
and again, this is a year by year, 149 compared to
I read.
Susan B. Anthony, 202. So let's just call that a difference of 50 students. By the time you iterate that 3 times, it's a difference of 150 students over sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. That's a whole nother grade level in the Susan B. Anthony school than there is in one whole less grade level that in the Garfield school. So that it really is not as simple, I think, as people might think it is to go to neighborhood schools, because the kids are not, at least right now, they're not evenly dispersed throughout the community. There's far more on the west side of the city than there are on the east side.
Even though there's more students that live on the other side than the west side.
Yeah,
The east side's more dense, population,
it is more dense, right? Yeah.
much more. Okay,
So,
so this will.
you know, I think it's a-
tabled, I guess, till the fall, and then we'll revisit it.
well, I don't know if maybe we should start a committee or something that can do some work. We had the REL, did an analysis of all of this. I tried to find today. And the best I could find was that they reported to the school committee in May of 2014. So that was 10 years ago. It probably is time to reconvene a team and have them dig into this issue again. My own interpretation is not a lot has changed, other than we've grown. And the problems we had 10 years ago are bigger than they were 10 years ago, not smaller. So, but I do think it would be worth it to have a team that can kind of dig into this and see what they can figure out.
Yeah.
Is there a subcommittee that would be appropriate for? Would it be?
Busing comes
Well,
under ways and means for
well-
some reason.
We talking about the lottery itself,
Yeah, the whole
This is why-
restructuring,
yeah.
yeah.
but that to me is not a ways and means thing. It would be, I think the cost would be
Well, the cost
referred
is
to
why.
ways and
Well, the
means.
cost
But
is,
I would think it would be a committee of the whole to decide if there's a subcommittee and an appetite of what to do, maybe with
brought
some
it up at the last meeting and it went to ways and means.
Yeah, went to Ways and Means to discuss the cost.
Cost,
plots,
Yeah.
but we don't have any.
well, we do, have-
Well, but I
Yeah,
think
Matt,
part of
so
that is because we're
it's not-
tying it to the transportation.
right.
And I,
Transportation
but I
is part
think,
of Ways and Means. so
but
that's
I
not
think to
like-
Stacy's point, we need to think of them separately, like we should think about how, if we want to restructure how we do middle school in the district, that's a question.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially because, and I keep getting back to this, but if the plan is a 4-year plan, like this school cannot stay vacant for 4 years.
Well, this school will
business-
still be here
The
for 3
business
years.
offices will be here, right, for 3
Correct.
years. So, I mean, I just think if we're gonna talk about middle school, then we should bring in all of the,
So when we
Moving
look
parts.
at it, didn't someone talk about asking principals to have like a survey or something? I
No.
thought
I didn't,
at the last meeting,
I'm gonna miss,
I will look at the minutes.
A
I
survey? What
kind
type of survey?
briefly went through, but I thought principals were asked, but someone brought up asking the principals to survey. So maybe between principals, a couple of teachers and a few school committee members, they can work on a plan.
yeah, or at least study what exists and what's
Yeah.
possible
Yeah.
and
Get
make
all the
recommendations.
information.
I guess my question is the way it was split up now, it was by schools. So that necessarily wasn't by residential lines, right? The way that you split up the
This here?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was just by which schools, so it's not an exact
No,
districting
'cause
plan.
Someone could live at the edge of it.
so I think it would be more, I remember the last meeting we talked, we said we were gonna draw the residential lines to see where students fell.
Yeah,
Those numbers may be different than.
true,
I
might
think what
equalize
we're
it a
looking
little
at.
bit.
Yeah, that's what I
Maybe.
thought.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Might be
I
accurate.
think it would. I think that you'd end up with a lot of parents who are saying, I know I live on this side of the street and you're telling me I have to go to Rummy Marsh,
Mhm.
but we're in the Lincoln School and all of our friends are going to the Susan B. Anthony. And I think it'll,
Which they do.
but that's something that we can ask this group to look
To
into.
look into.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the transportation on board?
Well, the committee can expect city side to be in communication as this budget process rolls out about the initial number that I've put on Schedule 19 as this is what it will cost to get the kids to school next year. You can expect them to be,
Has the bid come back on Healy?
the bid came back on
anyone, I'm
Healy.
sorry.
Yes, and so,
Cause someone said 14 million, is that right? Total? Not just for Healy, but for everything? Is that number?
I don't think we have all the bids back
That
yet.
was
We
the number
haven't
I had.
finalized the bid for inside sped transportation.
they're both on my desk and we're going through the price proposals.
Someone threw that number. at me
Some of
and
the
I
vehicle
didn't-
specifications. So I'm just
Because it was a
saying,
substantial increase over last year.
Right,
That
they-
was part of this conversation.
right, that's a small part of our conversation on Schedule 19, but for Ways and Means, I would expect the city to be intersecting with the agreed upon budget for what's available for transportation for next year.
I didn't say you got it wrong. No, I didn't say you got it wrong. Okay, the last, so I think we're all set. Does anyone, I don't want to cut anyone off. Freddie, sorry, I apologize. Mr. Nell, do you have anything to say? I'm sorry.
Just a point of information through you to the superintendent. Michael. The city, if we cut back on the amount of buses, the savings is not on the school committee side. Am I correct?
You are, yeah, that savings would go to the city. not
Okay,
to the-
so if hypothetical, we said, it was mentioned who would go to the Susan B. Anthony. If you were to say any child can go to the Susan B. Anthony as long as their parents drive them, we're not gonna provide buses. It doesn't change anything because it's not on the school department side. It would mean probably more kids there. So I think any subcommittee, any committee, however you wangle who goes where, the savings per se. Now, going along with the chairman, as far as people picking their school, I'm in full favor of it because people across the street want to know how come I can't walk across the street, but I can go to Beachmont. So
Right.
I think that's a totally different horse. Transportation, as discussed this afternoon, is immaterial to the school committee. Is that too much, an easy assumption, or what is it?
Yeah, I think it's true, Mr. Snella. I think, I think Mr. Cruz said it the best, that we want to be good friends and allies with the city. And we can appreciate that this is causing a strain for them and do whatever we can to reduce that strain. I feel like we have been doing that all along.
Okay, no, it's just, I mean, everything's circling and it comes back to the same thing. No dollar value technically to the school department itself. So our problem, hopefully within the high school being built, freeing up space, then that's going to alleviate for everybody. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. All right, so the only thing, before I move on to number 3, the only thing I would ask for in next month is fine. If I could have that third, I can't say the word, on that third option, no lottery and 1 mile.
Right.
I would just be curious. And I realize the savings first year. If you could do 1, 2, and 3, that would be helpful. First year savings, I'm not expecting much because it's not a big number, but by the third year. And again, to say that we'll be in this building in middle school in 4 years, I'm not prepared to, I'm not prepared to say that. I don't know.
No, I'm not saying.
I
that.
don't
I'm
have my,
just saying we
no,
should
I'm not,
definitely
but I'm
have-
just saying, I don't know that that's gonna happen.
Man, yeah.
I don't know.
Have a plan.
Yeah, I don't mind. I just don't know what's gonna happen. Okay, so the last item on the agenda, additional classroom space at the Garfield Middle School. I do financial literacy work there about 3 days a week. And I noticed that I got off the wrong, I'll be honest, I got off the wrong floor one day. I wasn't paying attention. And the second floor, outside the second floor, I'll say elevator stair area, it's kind of walled off. And there's space there for the elementary. But on the third floor, it's open. And last year, I don't know if Kyle remembers, Mr. Swanson, I apologize. I don't know if he remembers, but last year when we were doing that, kids with special needs reorganization, I had said to him, hey, I know we're gonna need some classroom space at the Garfield Middle. I said, when you come off the third floor elevator stairwell, whatever you wanna call it, there's a big open space there. And you could make classrooms like this one outside on the third floor, because it's totally wide open. So, again, I'm on the third floor 2-3 times a week doing the financial literacy class, for the 6th grade, and I see it, and that prompted me to ask if that would be possible. I do see teachers there on carts. I know teachers leave their classroom to let other teachers come in. And I think that's sometimes difficult, you know, it's their prep and, you know, maybe they don't have any place to go or they have to leave their classroom and I feel bad. So I always feel badly about that. And I'll tell you, I'm gathering up the stuff as quickly as I can from the students and helping out because, another class is coming in and another teacher's coming in. So the teacher that's in the room is leaving and another teacher's coming in. So it's always like a rush at the end of the class to get, you know, squared away, stuff put away and so that the next class and the next teacher can come into the classroom. So that's my question.
Okay, so what's unique about the second floor is that it doesn't have the same volume as the third floor and the fourth floor. So within discussions of the fire department, they do not want, they consider that space an evacuation space for overcrowding during an evacuation from both wings. There's a north wing and a south wing to that building on the first, third, and fourth floor. The second floor is unique where it doesn't have a north wing because there's the pool and the gymnasium that take up 2 floors on the first floor. So we were able to, I won't call it an argument, but convince them that we didn't need that entire space on the second because we don't have the volume that we have on the third and fourth, and they bought into our theory. But they were adamant about no doors, that the walls don't go to the ceiling, that they're, you know, gonna be able to hear fire alarms and there was smoke, it would travel through and open air ceilings so they would travel throughout. So what you really have on the second floor is just a petition.
Agreed.
It's called a demountable wall, which technically it's not really fastened, it's held
Agreed.
there by pressure.
Agreed.
So we were able to kind of convince them on the second floor that if they needed all this space on the third floor, that we could really only technically needed half of that on the second. So they were able to buy into that. As far as recent conversations with the fire department, they don't want anything as far as a chair in that space.
Okay.
Never mind walls and doors.
Okay.
So, you know, when they start looking at that space, they, you know, I never even thought of it like that.
I didn't.
But they worry about a stampede on a mass exit that say, if you got to the stairways and all of a sudden everyone was trying to get out and they couldn't get out, that this is the overflow. And that's why they designed that space as open space.
And that prevents crushing.
It never occurred to me until they started to explain that. And then we waged the argument for the second floor that says, well, this doesn't have the volume.
I didn't take out my magic tape measure, but the fourth floor's got the opposite. Do they stick out further than the?
I don't,
bet they do.
I don't believe they do. I
I'll
think
have to
that,
take a peek, yeah.
that glass
Okay.
wall goes all the way up. So that is the 4 floors.
Okay, so we can't put the classrooms in because
don't
the fire
think we could-
department won't allow it. That's.
Yeah, I mean, in recent conversations, I mean, we actually went out and priced these walls. And it was just to do what we did on the second floor and put a wall in between to kind of make 2 spaces like that.
Yeah,
And it was like, I think it was $90,000 for the same walls. And they,
well, I just figured we were creating, you know, extra classroom space. with it,
yeah,
so
no, I mean, it was something we were all thinking about too until
Okay.
the fire
No, if the fire
department
department
said,
won't allow it, then
Yeah, I
I
mean,
get it.
that's-
No, thank you. I
no,
didn't, that wasn't my thought.
my pleasure. They-
I've looked at it, well, I've looked at it now for, I'll be honest, I looked at it for 3, I've been doing financial literacy there for 3 years and I've been looking at it for 3 years. And like I said, last year when we were doing the special, kids with special needs move around, I thought it'd be a good place because the elevator and the stairs are right there and
Right.
easy for them to get out.
No, I mean, it made sense to me too, until
Okay.
they brought,
I
they
appreciate-
brought
I
to me
appreciate
their
it.
theory on why that
I-
space is actually not
Further
probably,
thing from my mind. I
Yeah,
thought
me
it was a
too.
money issue and that's why it's here.
yeah, I
Yep,
mean,
okay, thank you.
okay.
Well,
Sorry.
If I can respectfully, I do also want to say that this is something that's in the purview of the school department, that this is something that Carl and the principals and I should be working on when we do regularly every year. We look at where is there space, where is something we can change, where's something that we can make more comfortable. And I just think that that's the best place for these ideas to come from. Not that they shouldn't, not that school committee members shouldn't have ideas. I know you all do, but I would appreciate it if the courtesy was shown to talk to me about it instead of bringing it to a committee meeting. Because we do this work internally and do have that information that could easily be shared without it being a meeting. If that makes sense.
Well, I think this lets people know why we can't, and I think it explains it fairly well, so I think,
Again,
I don't think it's a bad.
I think it should have maybe been brought up to the building committee or referred to the building committee. I just out of respect for the people that we work with. I'm not sure who's on that still, but it could be you.
It is.
The other question I made, how many classes are like that we're replacing, we don't have the same classrooms for, that are temporary,
Like on carts, working off.
like one teacher's leaving the other classrooms. Is there a lot of classrooms like that, or just like a couple, or?
I would have to look into that
I'm just
to
curious.
pull that data. I don't know it
Okay,
offhand,
okay.
but I can tell you, generally speaking, a teacher is only teaching
Right,
for 4 out of 6 periods a day.
okay,
So for 1/3 of the day,
Right.
they're either in their common planning period or their PGT, we call it professional growth time, or they're on their prep. And so one of the things, like even you're gonna see this in the design of the new high school, is MSBA doesn't even allow that anymore. Like classrooms are meant to be instructional spaces. And when teachers are on their prep or a PGT, they should be in a meeting room or in a faculty room. So that that whole resource with a smart board and everything else that goes into a classroom space isn't just sitting idle.
right,
I get the point, having taught myself that having my own room and my own space was wonderful. I enjoyed being in my own classroom during my prep period because I had all my books there and all my resources were there and I could plan more easily. I was on my own computer. But I think those are things that we have to think a little bit more about. And that's not just a problem at the Garfield School. It's at all of the middle schools and the high school because we just don't have the space for it. The place where teachers typically have their own space now is at the elementary level because they're in one room with the kids all day, except when the kids go to a specialist. And even then, when the kids go to a specialist, the teacher is often in a PGT, in another room, in a meeting room, not necessarily in the classroom.
Isn't there something to be said though about a classroom that you enter into and you're immersed in that subject, like with, that subject matter on the walls and decorated, like
Yeah,
in that fashion, there's something to be said. When we were in, I want to say maybe the Garfield School, I don't remember, I don't want to say which name of the school it was, but we were in one of the schools going to the classrooms, we were doing the walk around.
yeah,
That was something that I noticed. Some of the classrooms looked like old and just cold and like
and barren.
nobody cared and barren.
Mhm.
And I couldn't imagine learning in that space. As opposed to going into the classrooms that had like maps and, that subject matter just like everywhere and you're immersed in it. It just, I just feel like there's something to be said, but if we don't have the space, we don't have the space. But I would say the preference is
Yeah,
obviously for teachers to have a space that they can make into a true learning environment.
right. And one of the things that we've been working on, particularly at the high school, but at the middle schools as well, is making sure that any teacher isn't in more than 2 spaces.
Mhm.
So if there's a teacher who's traveling to room 134, they should be in that room 2 periods a day. And then in a second room, 2 periods a day, so that they're not traveling to 4 different rooms for their 4 teaching blocks. And that's one of the things that the principals have been working on, and that can also give them that sense of ownership where they can feel comfortable immersing the space in their content area, because I only have to split my stuff between 2 rooms. My stuff was always the kids' work, because that was, the best thing. And, one of my favorite things I used to get in trouble for was, when we did a unit on sound waves in function stats and trig, we built our own wind pipes, sorry, what do you call them? Wind chimes, thank you. And the kids had to get the measurements right and cut them right in order to make the sound resonate through the pipes, and that was always great, but after we did that project, I had 100 set of wind pipes hanging from these little rafters in my ceiling, and Jim Bonds would come in and yell at me and tell me I can't hang stuff from the ceiling, and then would have to take them home, and, you know, that, I think that one of the things that we've struggled with coming back from COVID is finding the opportunity to build that kind of environment again. We've been so bogged down in so many other things that, it's been hard to get back to that, but I do think, like, you look around here and you start seeing more and more stuff like the Soul Box Project, and,
Yeah,
you know, we appreciate what it does for kids when they're stimulated just being in a room
Just
in
being
a
in a room.
positive way.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that we should be working on as well, I agree.
Motion to adjourn,
Wait. Second,
so meeting is now adjourned.
at 5:04. And we're late.
let me go and get my tea.